Hi YouTube, Kate Johansson here with Fast Pup Dog Training, and I want to talk to you guys tonight about something that I've been meaning to do a video on for months and months, something that's just been eating at me, and every time I think I'm just going to let it go, another one comes up, another example comes up, and what I'm talking about is how hiring the wrong dog trainer to help you with your dog can ruin your dog's life, ruin your relationship with the dog, ruin your relationship with, it can end your dog's life. Some people may decide to euthanize their dog or take their dog to the shelter where they'll euthanize it, or send the dog back to the breeder, or rehome the dog to who knows what's going to happen. And if people have kids at home and the kids are old enough to know what's going on, what kind of a message does that send to the kids? That's something that puzzles me so much. To say, well, our dog doesn't listen to us, so we're going to rehome her, or we're going to kill her, or we're going to take her to the shelter, dump her in the trash. It just doesn't seem like a very good message for kids. So I'm going to use one example to start with. This happened a few clients back, and we've just recently kind of finished the training. The owner's really happy with the way things are going now, but she was very frustrated, and the first time I heard about her, she actually had come across the street to a park where one of my clients was working his dog, and she saw from across the street how much control he had over his dog and how happy his dog was, and how she was placing on a park bench and he could walk away and he could throw bumpers for her, and then he could release her to go get it, and then she would bring the bumper to him and sit at his side. And this lady was so blown away because she was so frustrated with her German short hair. And so my client told me that he had recommended that she call me, and he let me know, and I was waiting, and sure enough, she did call. And what happened is she'd gotten the dog at 5 months of age back at the end of October, beginning of November, from the breeder, and the first couple days everything was wonderful. She now thinks, she's sure, that those first couple days the dog must have been drugged by the breeder. The dog was drugged, and that's why she was so good. And then by the third day, things were starting to come apart at the seams. And she had thought that she could take the dog to her office and keep her in a crate in the office, and then on breaks take her to the park and let her run and play, and then come back and be in the office with her, which to me, that's ideal. Like, if you can take your dog to work, a lot of people here in the Pacific Northwest work for Amazon and other companies, and they're able to take their dogs to work, and the dogs lay under their desk while they're working, and then they take them on breaks and stuff like that. I think that's just ideal. However, she would put the dog in a crate in the office, inside her office, and go out to work with patients, and the dog would start thrashing in the crate and banging and whining and crying and howling because she wanted attention, and she was a little nervous because she was all by herself in that office, inside the office, and she just wasn't used to it. And so my client couldn't concentrate on her patients. She was out there hearing all this and trying to do her work, and it wasn't working out. So then she tried leaving the dog home with her husband, and her husband works from home a lot. And same thing, if the dog's in the crate at the house, she's crashing and thrashing and crying and howling and being, just, I can't stand this, and rah, 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 rah. And so the husband would let the dog out to wander around the house, and he'd try to work on his computer, and the dog would just be roaming around, and she'd be chewing on the rug and chewing on the table legs and destroying things, and just on and on and on. And it got so bad that around Christmas time, husband sat wife down and said, this is not working. And if this dog doesn't change, we're going to have to send the dog back to the breeder or rehome her because it's causing too much chaos. We're not getting our work done. there's too much stuff being destroyed, on and on and on. And on top of that, on top of all the other stuff, the dog was constantly watching the front door. And whenever they would open the door, she would try to run out. And she succeeded a whole bunch of times. So she'd run out onto the street in their neighborhood, and she'd run down to the end of the street, disappear, wouldn't come back when they'd call her. And who knows where she was. And eventually, maybe an hour later, the dog would come back. But in the meantime, nobody knew where she was, what she was doing, if she was getting hit by a car, so on and so forth. So anyway, my now client at that time didn't know where to turn. So she went down to the local animal food store and asked if they knew of any trainers. And so they gave her a name of a guy. And in the meantime, my client had ordered an electronic collar from Garmin, because that's what, not Garmin, he uses a different type of electronic collar, but he was using, as part of his protocol in the park with his dog, he had an electronic collar on his dog. And so she thought, well, I'll order one of those, because if it works for him, it must work for me, right? Not realizing that just because you own a hammer does not mean you are a master carpenter. E-collars, any other training equipment is simply a tool. And if you don't know how to train dogs, you're not going to be able to train a dog with any of those tools either. So anyway, the trainer that she got from the pet food store came and showed her his way of doing things, and none of it worked. And he came several times, nothing worked. The dog was still running away, still pulling on the leash, lunging, and just chewing on the furniture and carrying on in the crate, all the same stuff, nothing. And so finally the guy said there was just nothing else that could be done, that it was just the breed. She got the wrong breed. She got a German short hair, and that's just the way they are. And so anyway, after she saw my client in the park, she called me, and I went over, and at that time she had just finished retrieving the dog from getting out the front door, and she'd been running up and down the street calling and crying and just tearing her hair out. And by the time I got there, things were really bad. And I could tell that she had been crying, and she was very emotional. And she basically said, I guess I'm just going to have to get rid of this dog. And the dog was the sweetest dog. And I sat down on the floor in front of her front door, and the dog came over and just laid in my lap and just wanted me to pet her belly, and she was just so sweet. And I looked up at her and I said, you are not going to have to get rid of this dog. If you like German short hairs, this is one of the nicest German short hairs I have ever seen, and all we need to do is train her. So we went outside and we started working her. I had the lady go up and down the street, and I worked her own electronic collar that she had already gotten. And after a few minutes, she said, well, what do I need to do? And I said, well, we just need to, sign a piece of paper and get going. And so that's what we did. And after the very first session, she had so much more control over that dog than she ever dreamed. And now the dog is able to be off leash. She's able to take her on hikes in the woods, and dog sits and stays, never runs out the front door. The dog doesn't scream and carry on inside the crate. She can take her to the office, and then she gets to go to the park on breaks, and at lunchtime she takes her over to this great big dog park, and the dog's living life. And when she stays home with the husband, the same thing. He can get his work done, and things are just a lot better. Another dog, Duchess, is she's half Mastiff and half Great Dane. She's a huge dog, and the people called me right when they first got her. They'd only had her a couple of days, and things were not really going very smoothly, so they started looking for somebody that could help them. And it turns out that this dog, they got her at 8 months old from the Humane Society, and this dog had been brought back. She'd been adopted by 3 different families and brought back by each one of them in the course of 6 months, from the time she was 2 months to 8 months when these people got her. Because they couldn't train her. She was misbehaving. She was biting, which she was basically puppy mouthing is all she was doing, and nobody bothered to teach her not to do that. But now she's 75 pounds, and when she's puppy mouthing, it kind of starts to hurt, and even these new owners didn't know what to do about it. So and then she's like needs exercise, so she's running out to the end of her leash, and she's got her tail tucked, and she wants to do the zoomies, and she weighs 75 pounds, and she's really, really hard to hold on to. And so we got her going so that the people could walk her, and then pretty soon after a couple days they were able to let her off leash, and she would come back because we worked on her recall. And same thing, the guy is able to take her to work. He works at Amazon. We're so fortunate here in the Pacific Northwest. So many people have employers that allow them to bring their dogs to work, so that's really awesome. And he really started taking her to work, I think, after the first session, and they just worked through it. I have another new client that that has a dog that she had hired a trainer, quote unquote, to come out, and the lady that came out taught her how to do all kinds of fancy hand signals. And when the dog lunges at the windows, the front window, when people go by, the trainer told her to say thank you and then lure her over to the other side of the room and give her cookies. And it didn't, none of this worked to solve any of their problems. In fact, I imagine the problems got worse. They couldn't walk her because if she sees anything, a person or a dog, she just goes crazy, pulling on the leash, lunging and barking and growling like she wants to eat them, attack them. And it was so bad that a week or so ago, the dog intimidated a guy so badly that he said if he saw her again with that dog, that he was going to call the police. And he was very, very angry and screaming at her. And so she also met one of my clients at the dog park and asked how she was having so much control over her dog, and got my name and called. And so now we're working through all of that. In the very first session, the dog was very intimidating. I could see why somebody would want to call the police, because the dog was pretty intimidating. And so anyway, going back to the beginning, it is so important to, when you're hiring a dog trainer, to make sure, let me get this phone, of course. Hang on, I'll be right back. Sorry about that. When you're hiring a dog trainer, it is so important to, at the very least, ask to see the trainer's dogs. Make sure that that trainer knows how to train his own dog, her own dog. It doesn't matter how many degrees in animal science, animal behavior, biology, veterinary school, whatever, it doesn't matter. I've known of so many people that pay veterinarians to tell them how to train their dogs. Veterinarians don't learn how to train dogs in veterinary school. They also don't learn how to feed dogs. They don't learn anything about nutrition. They learn how to do some surgeries and pass out pharma for symptoms. They don't know anything about training dogs. Now, some of the best dog trainers I've ever known have been veterinarians, because they apply themselves to learning how to train dogs outside of their business of being a veterinarian. But most veterinarians that I've met know absolutely nothing about training dogs. So keep that in mind. I saw a video the other day, a veterinarian with DVM behind her name and then a list of letters representing God knows what behind that, of all the certifications and licenses and whatever she has. And she was on this video talking about how e-collars will ruin your dog, ruin everything. And nowhere did she ever say that she had ever accomplished anything in the dog training world, that she'd ever managed to put any kind of a title on a dog, or even just pass a basic obedience course with a dog. Nothing. So you want to know when you're hiring somebody, A, you want to see their dog, and B, you want to find out if they've ever put a master hunter on a dog or gotten a Schutzen, ring sport, rally, agility title on any dogs. Have they ever had to work through issues and teach themselves or learn from other people how to solve problems out in the field in the real world? And if they haven't, maybe you want to keep looking, okay? So it's so important, because if you hire the wrong dog trainer and that dog trainer tells you there's nothing that can be done, you just need to either rehome the dog or live with this, because it's all about the dog's breed. That can cause really big problems. You can end up rehoming your dog, taking your dog to the shelter, euthanizing your dog. And if you have kids, what kind of a message does that send to them? So please, when you're hiring a dog trainer, make sure that they know how to train dogs. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.